Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this afternoon's Honors Colloquium. My name is John Beckfeld, and I am proud to be the Interim Dean of the Albert Dorman Honors College, a top 10 public university honors college. So why are we top 10? We're top 10 because of the students. We're top 10 because of the alumni. We're top 10 because of our Board of Visitors, of which our guest is a member. And of course, our senior administration. And me. Well, one of the wonderful things about being in the Honors College is we have events such as this. It gives you an opportunity to meet very distinguished alumni and other guests and hear about their experiences and the path that they took to their successes. And it's very important to you, by the way, to take advantage of every one of those opportunities that is afforded to you. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Richard Sweeney. Mr. Sweeney graduated from NJIT in 1981 with a degree in mechanical engineering, and he later earned his MBA from Fairleigh Dickinson University. In the early 90s, after more than 25 years in manufacturing and product development, he was one of the early investors and co-founders of Keurig, makers of single-cup coffee machines, as we know. Mr. Sweeney benefited from the GI Bill to help fund his education at NJIT, having served in Vietnam. He's a true war hero, having been awarded both the Bronze Star and the Silver Star. The Silver Star is one of the highest military decorations for valor awarded to members of the United States Armed Forces. Among his many other activities, Mr. Sweeney is a member and vice chairman of the Honors College Board of Visitors. He's also a generous supporter of honor scholars through the Sweeney Schultz Endowed Scholarship. There's much more I could say about Mr. Sweeney, but we've invited him here today so he could tell his own story. Today, Mr. Sweeney will tell us about his life experiences and the path that propelled him to found a company that is truly a household name. Mr. Richard Sweeney.
Thanks. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be here. And one of the things I've learned as an entrepreneur is that you have to be prepared for the unexpected. You never know what's going to happen, what challenges are going to face you in a day. And I realized that, again, today when I flew a plane down from meetings up in Vermont and left Morristown Airport, leaving my computer and my notes on the plane. Fortunately, I have my little book. This isn't a prayer book, but if you want to say a prayer that I make it through this without my regular notes, that would be appreciated. Now, my career path has been somewhat circuitous and non-standard. I graduated 50 years ago from Roselle Catholic High School in the fourth graduating class. In fact, we just had our reunion this past weekend. And when something like an event like that takes place, you wonder, how the hell did that happen? Did you ever think there would be something in your life that was 50 years in your past? But it can happen, trust me. I was not an honor student in high school, and as a result of that, graduated in 1966. In June, in September, I was drafted into the United States Army, and then shortly after that, found myself as in a Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol team in Vietnam. A meaningful experience in that it helped me understand myself a lot better, certainly learn to appreciate every other day we're given, and understand how tragic it is when people have that day given away forever. But it also taught me something very important about building teams and working together as teams, and I'll cover that a little later in the talk, but teams are critical. I find it's sometimes an understudied theme, but it really is what drives any organization, whether it's a government organization, an industrial organization, or an academic institution. So the Keurig system, or the entrepreneurial process, for me, it evolved in kind of three stages. You have the idea, the entrepreneur guys, in the case of Keurig, it was John Sylvan, Peter Dragon, and myself, who collectively, John had the idea for a single-serve portion pack. And it was a phrase that took us all about 6 months to say, single-serve portion pack system for the office coffee service market. And my daughter, after about 6 months, was able to repeat that, and people had no idea what she was talking about. But, so you have the idea guys, but having an idea is one thing, bringing an idea to market is something else. And how many of us have said, geez, I could have done that, that's a simple idea. I mean, how difficult is it to make a cup of coffee out of a salad dressing cup? But we were able to do that. The idea is one thing. The next thing you know that you need, though, are some enablers. The people that will provide you with the resources to begin to bring this idea to light. And the Keurig architecture is basically a three-legged stool. You have the portion pack, which you're all familiar with. I hope you all use and buy. That's how we really generate our money. We have the appliance, which is a revenue generator that sits on the counter. And then behind the curtain, we have the packaging automation. And this is some complicated, highly automated machinery. The early ones weren't that complicated, but they weren't that efficient. I designed them. But then we got some really good guys in to do some really good engineering on them. And they produce the K-Cups. And right now, my early machines were producing 100 cups a minute, and perhaps they'd have an uptime of 80%, and we'd have a yield of about 95%. It wasn't terrible, but it got us off the ground, but it really wasn't the most efficient. The machines we have today will produce 800 cups a minute, several different robotic interfaces to put the labels on, put them in boxes, nest and stack them, make them all nice and efficient. They're very cool to watch. But that early investment was critical to us, and we needed $1 million to get that started. One, to cover us and spend $600,000 for the first packaging line, while at the same time we were perfecting the K-Cup and making the appliance. So the appliance was to a low-pressure system. We wanted to mimic the coffee extraction process you get with a French press, if you've seen those plunger devices. So we needed to mimic that process because it has a very good coffee extraction. The K-Cup, we needed an oxygen barrier container, and we needed that because coffee gets stale very quickly after it's roasted and ground. And even after you brew a cup of coffee, it goes stale quite quickly. The first cup out of the pot's the best. Come back in 20 minutes, and it's pretty stale. Come back if it's still sitting there in an hour, and it's really atrocious. So, and that was one of the drivers for our business, though. We wanted to ensure people got a fresh cup of coffee every time and really enjoyed the experience of the particular blends that the coffee roasters have developed for the consumer. And we concluded rather quickly that the only way to ensure that is to brew it as you consume it, 1 cup at a time. So that was the overriding concept. How do we execute that? That drove us down to the three-legged stool, K-Cup appliance, and packaging equipment. But we were self-funded from 1993 until 1996, actually late 95. And we didn't have enough money to develop our own portion pack or K-Cup. And we were looking around for some sort of an oxygen barrier container that we thought must be out there. And by happenstance, one day on a flight, we got our salad dressing in this little cup, the Ken salad dressing cup. And that, in fact, is the K-Cup. Looked on the bottom of it, it said it was the WinPack C150 cup, 150 cc's. And we thought, okay, that thing that's about 1.5 inches high and 1 inch across, we can probably put a filter in there that perhaps will hold enough coffee so that if we put it in our appliance, still being developed, would make an 8-ounce cup of coffee. So we did. So, fast forward 23 years, and we've built a $4.5 billion business by making a cup of coffee out of a salad dressing cup. So, who'd have thought? As I tell people, the light bulb wasn't invented by studying the candle. You probably all heard that. So we had that three-legged stool. We initially got started in the office coffee service market, and which was good because it was a low cost of entry. We didn't need a lot of advertising. All we had to do was bring some distributors on board who would be willing to put our coffee system in the offices of their clients, generally law offices, financial offices, the low-hanging fruit, as they say. And if the machine broke, we could go out and replace it quickly. With a consumer product, a consumer, all of us, have a much higher standard of reliability. And the offices loved the system because they didn't have to rely on somebody to make the coffee. In fact, the coffee was good. Green Mountain Coffee was our first licensed roaster. And and the office manager looked like a hero because he took away one nuisance element of providing coffee to the employees and gave them a good product or a good beverage to enjoy every day. So they liked that. The business grew to the point where in 2002, our revenues hit about $22 million. In 2005, after some success, we decided it's time to make a home brewer, a home appliance. And we had a successful Christmas there. Our revenue shot up to $160 million. And, you know, we were really starting to rock and roll. We've got a good business. We're looking for some new innovation to put into the product. We're looking to expand the markets. Now we're on TV. We were acquired by Green Mountain Coffee Roasters. We went from being a private company to a public company. And we were the darlings of Wall Street for a while. In 2006, we hit, as I said, 160 million. Then we went to 320 million to 510 million. In 2012, we had sales of $2.1 billion, which is staggering. Let me back up for a second. In 2005, when we were a privately held company, the original venture investors in the company said, all right, you guys are successful, we want to exit, we want to get out. So they brought in an investment banking firm to write a prospectus on us and parade us around to anybody who wanted to buy us. And Green Mountain Coffee Roasters decided to buy us, so they bought the company for $168 million. And we were now a publicly traded company. So that was good. We had a lot of growth. In some respects, too much growth. We were getting away from ourselves. Where was I going? This is where my notes on the plan are losing me. When we were putting together that prospectus, the investment bankers wanted to put together a 5-year plan. Where do you think, how big is big? How big can you guys go? So we were, as I said, about $160 million in sales. And we said, well, in 5 years, by 2010, if the stars aligned and everything's in favor, we should be about a $600 million company. 2010 came and went, and we were over $1 billion company. So we didn't know how big we were going to be. We had no real means of being able to forecast the level of success that we enjoyed. And we're challenged with it. And the challenge brought the 3 main risk elements into our business. One was innovation. What are we doing that's going to be new and improved and excite the consumer on the brewer side? You know, we're going to have the little digital clock and timer automatically shut on and shut off. We're going to be able to offer various sizes from 6 ounces to 12 ounces. So all this interesting innovation and still maintain the quality of the beverage that the consumer was enjoying. The second element was speed to market. We're now in the consumer appliance business, and 45% of all the brewers we sell are sold in the Christmas season. So in the best planning, we should have our innovation frozen in place by March of that year to get ready for Christmas, because we have to then go to our contract manufacturers, complete the tooling designs, get all the critical to quality suppliers lined up so we can get the components to build the hundreds of thousands to what's become millions of appliances for the Christmas season. And then when Christmas comes, you hope to hell everything you put together is going to work and be reliable. And that has, from time to time, been a challenge. And it results in higher return rates on dissatisfied customers. We had to keep driving forward and making that happen, because once you're a public company, every 13 weeks you're reporting on how well you're progressing and what your successes are and what you're going to be, because the investors are betting on your future success, or they're going to short you and bet on your failure. and we've experienced both. So that was a critical part of the business, setting that up. Give me a second to get my notes and turn the page. So the innovation, speed to market, the third risk element, and this was the most challenging one, and it was the scale risk. So if we had a critical to quality component supplier, somebody making pumps or a valve or a solenoid, and they were making 5,000 units a week for us, and now we're going to triple that for next year's production, and now they have to make 15,000 a week. Do they have the processes in place to make that happen, to provide us with the reliability we need to have a good product? And in some cases, they failed us. They lost their process control, and we were getting defective parts. And more often than not, as in the cases, as you go out and become entrepreneurs or product developers, you'll be forever shadowed by the dark cloud of unintended consequences. And 80% of the time, write this down, 80% of the time these consequences, unintended consequences, are going to be unfavorable. 20% of the time you'll get a eureka moment, and you'll think you're smart, and you really just got lucky. But that's, that's the case. And now we have to see if our appliances are going to sell through. So we make all this investment, build all this inventory, set all the logistics in place, and scale up and hope that the consumer loves what we do. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we're building the infrastructure of packaging automations so we can fulfill the demand that all these brewers are going to be requiring. So that it's a lot of logistics. The business analytics became a very important part of our business, both in terms of predictive modeling and forecasting, but also in developing models for what's the reliability of the brewer going to be. And in fact, when I first put together the analytics department, we had come off of a season where we had a number of reliability issues going back to these components that had lost process control. I said we have to establish a reliability standard. I was reporting to the board of directors. They were getting very impatient. Why do we have these big warranty write-offs? And how big is it? And how can you improve the reliability? And frankly, I didn't know what the reliability was, much less improve it. I didn't know what the baseline was. So we had a company who was gathering up not almost all, but probably about 30% of the returns from retailers. So it was a statistically significant number, which was important to us. And before they would tear a brewer apart for disposal, for a responsible disposal, separating the plastics from the printed circuit boards with stainless steel and all that, and get it in a waste or in the correct waste or recycling stream, they would download the information from the PROM. And we find out the serial number of the brewer. One of the really smart things we did early on was serial number of every product. In the beginning, somebody said, why do you want to do that? I said, I don't know why, but I think it's going to be important. That's serial number of every product, and it was very important because it told us the date of birth, if you will, of the brewer. We could find out whether that had crashed after 200 cycles or crashed after 5 cycles, whether it had 0 or whether it had 10 overpressure events because of some malfunction in the brewer. So it gave us a lot of data, and we had to start to assemble this. So I was thinking one day, I've got to talk to the board about reliability and the metrics necessary on that. And I'm thinking, mean time to failure, mean time between failure. And as I start to think about how I explain this to the board, my eyes were glazing over. I knew their eyes were going to glaze over. It just put them to sleep and not understand what we were talking about. So I thought there's got to be a simpler way, and just one of those 20% eureka moments, I thought, really, what is reliability? And reliability for a product is just a function of quality over time. Where on a component, it can be very binary. It works or it doesn't work. But for something you want to use day in and day out, it's a function of quality over time. It's, aha, we have something. And I thought, what would be an acceptable metric for reliability? And I thought, well, I'm not sure where we are now, but I know it's not that great. Let's say we'll go for 95% in 24 months. So that became our new marching point. 95% in 24 months. And that meant that when somebody bought one of our appliances, I wanted that appliance to be working reliably for at least 24 months of service. So I went back to the analytics team, and these were the really smart mathematicians, and I said, with the data that we're getting from our reclamation center, what's our reliability now? And they said, well, what's reliability? It's a plan. It's quality over time, of course. So they said, well, you know, how would you measure that? I said, I don't know how to measure it. That's why you're here. But I want it to be 95% in 24 months. They said, oh, okay, we can do that. So they started to do their number crunching. And they came back and they said, Dick, are you sitting down? I said, yeah. I said, where are we? He said, well, we're at 83% at 14 months. I said, no wonder we got beat up. I said, how do we get to 95% at 24 months? And it was kind of a rhetorical question. And then we realized, well, while we were sorting all these products out by serial numbers, we found out which factories were making the most reliable machines. We found out what days of the week they make the most reliable machines and what shifts were making the most reliable machines. And on the other side of the coin, we knew which factories were making the least reliable machines and what days and on what shifts. And then we began to look at what do we need to become more reliable. And we looked at the automotive industry because they, you know, Ford reliability's product one and all that. And they used, you know, good statistical process controls and a Six Sigma model. So we got our team together and went out to each of the critical quality component suppliers and began to instill a Six Sigma discipline with them. Because if the reliability of the valve or the pump is only going to be, you know, at 80%, I'm not going to get to 95% on the appliance at the end of the day. Just by, you know, random statistics, I'll get someone that will get there, but not the majority of them. So we went out and instilled the Six Sigma discipline in the critical quality suppliers. We went to our contract manufacturers, and I had 4 independent contract manufacturers in China and Malaysia, and started working with them on best practices, because now we knew which factories were doing a great job and what ones weren't doing a great job. And I initiated a manufacturing summit where we brought all 4 of these competitors together. And as in my opening statement at this conference was, look, to the outside world, you're all competitors, and you're all trying to get our business. I said, in Keurig's world, you're all family, so get to know your cousins. We're going to need each other at some point in time. I don't know when or why, but we're going to need each other. And I said, the common denominator of each of you is that the product you put out the door has Keurig's name on it, not yours. So we're going to have best practices throughout our supply line. Everybody on board? They all nodded, they were on board. And when I had that first meeting and pulled this together, I was nervous going up. I was more nervous than having forgotten my notes this morning. When we got into about the first 2 hours of the discussion, they totally bought into it. In fact, Friday morning I'm leaving for China, and we're going to have our 5th annual contract manufacturing summit. So 4 different contract manufacturers, 3 locations in China, 1 in Malaysia. And each year we rotate the venue. And part of the requirement in understanding best practices is that they take their competitors on a tour of their Keurig production lines. And you want to see people who really want to compete to show their stuff. It's these guys and ladies. I mean, our largest contract manufacturer is run by a woman in her early 50s who has 25,000 employees, so it's pretty dynamic. We're building about 8 million brewers a year. Figure each brewer has about 400 parts in it, and we're hitting that 95% at 24-month reliability standard. So a lot of hard work went into it, and we're reaping the reward of that and seeing the success throughout the system. So that's been great. So that, you know, to just say this and overlay it is one thing. To really make it work requires teams that work well together. And this goes back to my days as a Long Range Reconnaissance team member and later team leader in Vietnam. There we had front scout, rear scout, radio operator, team leader, assistant team leader, and medic. My first 9 months were as a medic on the team. And our job was to infiltrate enemy areas, as I would say, count, defeat, divide by 2, and sneak out. That was a perfect day. Sneak in, sneak out. It's exactly what you want to do in the war zone. But sometimes you get caught, and then you absolutely have to rely on every other person on that team, and you do. So as I became a team leader and was starting to assemble my own team, I thought, what am I looking for? What attributes? And it occurred to me, it's really heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So you want people with passion for what they're doing. You want people with intelligence. You want people with courage, and never discount luck, but also recognize that comes in 2 flavors, good and bad. And the most difficult of those characteristics is courage. And now I'm not talking about the military aspect. Now I'm talking about the civilian aspect, the business aspect. So what's courage mean in the business world? It's having the courage within the team to bring truth to power. So what's that mean? You're given a project to do, you're given a budget to make it happen, and you have to finish in 12 months. You're 8 months into the project, and suddenly things aren't going your way. That dark cloud is right with you. And you have to now tell the upper management, hey guys, this isn't happening, we're in trouble. And we'll get it worked out, but we're not going to be on time, and we're probably going to be over budget. That truth to power aspect is so important in the business. And we've been successful when we had the foresight to bring truth to power, and we've had our failures, and we've had some of them, where we didn't bring truth to power. So I can't underscore that enough. Heart, smarts, guts, and luck. Guts is courage. Courage is bringing truth to power. So as you wander out into the business world, or develop whatever you're going to be working on, keep that in mind. It's an important one. So when you have these issues, you have to then focus on resolution, because if you don't resolve it, you don't move forward. The tagline internally that we developed at Keurig early on was hard work, smart work, teamwork. No surprise on teamwork after what I just said. And I would tell people, look, oftentimes the smart work will fail us. The hard work has to kick in overtime, but it's the teamwork that's going to find a resolution to the issue. So I would literally get guys around the table and say, all right, this valve isn't working, what's going on with it? And I said, everybody's free to be wrong, just not at the same time on the same subject. Let's get this worked out. And we would do it. And believe it, you're all engineers. You're left to solve problems. And when you get a group of gals and guys together trying to solve one particular problem and really focusing on it, sometimes some really amazing innovation comes out of it. The key is everybody has to leave your egos at the door. The other key, from the management standpoint, the hot shots I'm at now, that level I'm at now, is that we have to make sure we always have the teams back. That they can come out and say, we don't have it yet. It's like the jury coming out of the deliberations then. We don't have a verdict yet. Go back and keep working on it. We have to have their backs because they've got to be confident enough to know that they can come up with something that may not work and not have their heads chopped off for it. A good example, and I don't know, so this is absolutely in the crazy world between Sweeney's years. You take the Volkswagen issue with the diesel engines. No doubt their engineers were challenged with, we've got to get the emission data down to the acceptable levels for the North American market. You got to do it. Make that happen. And the guys are coming back and they're all smart, working on it. We're not there. We haven't got it worked out. We can't get the last couple of dangerous elements out of this exhaust system. And the suits are getting, they're getting impatient. So the scenario that plays around in my mind is somebody went to these engineers and said, I don't care what you do, make it work. Oh, if you don't care what we do, now we'll play with the software. I don't know if that's fact, maybe it'll come out someday, but I can certainly visualize this. It's the team bringing truth to power, and it's the management accepting what the team is telling them and trusting and believing them. So, trust is a big element. The core values that we've established at Keurig early on are trust, respect, and responsibility. First, it has to start with yourself. Trust yourself, be respectful of yourself, be responsible for yourself. Same thing with everybody who plays on your team, and then everybody with whom you deal with in the marketplace. Trust, respect, and responsibility. If you stay within those boundaries, you should come out okay. And I challenge myself every day with that. Am I being trusting, respectful, and responsible? So, getting back to the idea of solving problems, focusing on resolution, if you don't focus on that or get lost in somebody will put up their hands, well, what we need to do is a corrective action review. Well, corrective action reviews have a place, but they can often be an exercise in self-deception. So, if you're driving home and you get a flat tire, don't look for the nail. That's not going to resolve the issue you have at hand, right? So, focus on a resolution and move it forward. You can go back later and find that usually in the process of solving a problem, you've handled 90% of the corrective action. So, here's where we missed it, or here's where something fell apart. In the case of Keurig, what has happened to us often, and it's because the excuses are coming out. Okay, one of the reasons it's happened is because we were moving too fast, growing too strong. That scale risk was catching up with us. So if you think of developing any product, you would have the function of the product, how's it going to work? You have the form of the product, what's it going to look like? In the case of an appliance, user interface. And then you have the fit. How's it all going to go together? The area that we came up short on was setting tight specifications. We would do the function part, which was always fun. These are the benchtop models. This is how this is going to work, and this is fine. And then we would do the form, get an industrial design firm in, and say, okay, how do we make this thing look sexy so it will sell, and give clean lines and an easy user interface, and so on. And then we take those two circles of the Venn diagram and hand it off to our contract manufacturers and say, okay, make all this fit. Here's the initial bill of material, here's how that should go. You develop the water path, the wire routing, and all of that, and make it fit. It was not providing them with good specifications for a number of the critical quality components that caused some of the early issues we had as we started to grow and ramp up. Leadership, remember I talked about the elements. We have the enablers, maybe I didn't get the leadership. We have the entrepreneurs, the idea guys, the enablers, the initial investment people. The most important aspect, though, to make it happen, to bring the product to market, is to have a leadership team that will drive it forward. And we've been fortunate to have some really good leaders who did just outstanding work. And the characteristics of each of these leaders, I've always described in three ways. They had energy, intelligence, and integrity. So as you venture out into the workplace, look for those characteristics in a leader, and you'll have fun working wherever you are. The first one, Nick Lazaris, was with us from '96 until 2006, and he MIT undergrad, Harvard Business School, was CPA. I mean, this guy was all over the place, into the detail of everything, exactly what we needed to go from not being in market to bringing us to about a $250 million company. And then Green Mountain bought us. They brought in Larry Blanford and this woman, Michelle Stacy from Gillette, and she kind of introduced us to the fact that we were a consumer product company, where before we thought we were just a technology company in the coffee business. So it gave us a different look, a different spin, understand what the market's all about, and how do you grow on that realm. She brought us from $250 million to about $1.6 billion. Did a remarkable job. Larry, who was the enterprise CEO for Green Mountain, had two things. One, to continue to grow the Keurig business, and then to buy out all the other licensed roasters that we had developed who had packaging automation. That was important because in 2012 our patent was going to expire. So our key piece of intellectual property was going away. And then he had to take that to another level and say, okay, well, what's going to be the replacement IP once this goes? Because we're publicly traded. Wall Street wants to know, are these people sustainable? So we developed a couple of systems to work around the IP, develop new IP, but we didn't execute well. So we disappointed the consumer with that. We thought we were doing another better workaround, and we disappointed the consumer again. So now we had two tough years, and we're just starting to come out of that. In between that time, Larry and Michelle left, and we hired Brian Kelly from out of Coca-Cola. And Brian is a great visionary, terrific guy. He said, we're in the beverage business. He said, you guys have done a great job building this Keurig business from 3 guys in a Waltham watch factory to where it is today, and you sell 6 billion portion packs a year. That's pretty impressive. He said, but you know where I came from at Coke? We sell 1.8 billion beverages a day globally. So this guy had a planning horizon that was exponentially further than anything we ever dreamed of. And he said, and we can do a cold system in a portion pack. So he made a big bet that Keurig could do a cold system. And we came close, but not close enough. And we then an investment group from Europe came in and bought out all of Keurig and Green Mountain and made the decision to shut down the cold system. So that was a big turning point. So now, and that happened just this past March. So remember I mentioned that in 2006, Green Mountain bought us for $168 million. In March of 2016, JAB bought us for $13.9 billion. Wow, amazing. And that's where we are. And now they've got us refocused on being in the coffee business, getting back to basics, winning back our consumers that we've disappointed, and we're doing that and driving it forward. I have been thrilled to be a part of this for the last 23 years. To have the title of co-founder on my card. The other 2 co-founders got out of the business in 1996, so I'm the only one who kind of ran the table with this. And the thing I take the greatest pride in is that I've had the opportunity in my career to help incubate something that's created jobs. So that's cool. If there's a legacy, that's it. So with that, and in the absence of notes, I'll be happy to take any questions. Okay, it's clear. You must have questions, otherwise you're going to make me feel bad and think that you only came here for the cookies.
What do you think was an experience that you had here at NJIT that helped you develop the Keurig company?
Great question. And I know the answer to that. I didn't know it at the time, but when I came, and let me tell you how I got into NJIT. And when I came back got out of the Army, I worked as a UPS driver. I'm a 20-year-old veteran. In 1968, what did I know? And I worked as a UPS driver, got laid off, and then got a job in a factory on the shop floor as an assembler and a welder. A product you're all familiar with, the storage and retrieval carousel with a dry cleaner. Made hundreds of them. But that was my aha moment. I thought, this is really cool. We have raw material coming in one door, 200 guys doing stuff, and a product going out the other door. What makes all that happen? And I just became smitten with manufacturing at that point. And I started to have lunch with some of the engineers. I said, how do you learn about this stuff? And I said, well, you can look at an industrial engineering program, NCE, Newark College of Engineering. And I said, oh, that's cool. So I filled out my application, and about 2 weeks later in the mail, I had rejected. I was not a scholar in high school, and I was a little disappointed. So I came down to the admissions office, and I said, you know, I really want to do this. I'm in a different place now than I was, you know, 2.5 years ago when I was just out of high school. And I said, I have the GI Bill, so you're going to get paid. And all I want to see for a semester, you know, I have to work, so I'll be going to school at nights. And, you know, make a bet on me. If you're right, and, you know, I blow a semester and you get paid. On the other hand, I may make it. So then, one correction to the notes, I graduated in 82. I wish I graduated in 81, only because I was done with it, but I graduated in 82. And so, to answer your question, what I learned here, we had Professor Mr. Brennan, I forget his first name. He had been the general manager of McGraw-Edison. He was in the industrial engineering department. And they used to make these big attic fans. And they'd start with a big piece of steel in Switzerland. A lot of this stuff was being made in the States out there. And actually, they did in West Orange, New Jersey. And he said, we had all this waste steel, this big 18-inch disc that we were punching out of the steel so we could put in the fan blades and the motors and all that. And we didn't know what to do with them. And then one of the guys on the floor said, you know, we can make little barbecue grills out of this. And he made a stamping die that made this thing into a little pot or bowl. Some of you may be old enough to remember what the very simple barbecues looked like. Put a few stools on them, and they had built a whole little industry and product out of a waste item. And that's when it got me thinking about, you know, what kind of things can you do that aren't being done with stuff that's laying around? How do you make a cup of coffee out of a salad dressing cup? So that was one of the earliest moments that got that thought process going. And as I got into, went through the ranks out of from the shop floor to being a foreman, to running the stock room, to becoming a purchasing agent, director of materials, getting more on the operational side of things. We're always looking for ways to solve a problem, become more efficient, and how to, you know, how to take cost out and improve the product. And it's that process, that constant germination that finally, when I was in, it's probably about 46 when I started Keurig. So I was I've done everything late. So, you know, the only thing I did on time was go to war. But finished college late, I got married late, and had a daughter late, and all that stuff. But it's worked for me. And my latest late thing to do, I learned to sail when I was 40, and then I've sailed off to Bermuda and Halifax and Virgin Islands. And just this past April, I got my pilot's license. So that's been cool. So you have to keep challenges in front of you. And, but yeah, that, Mr. Brennan's lecture stuck with me. There was another, a young PhD, you remember, this young guy who was an industrial engineering professor who died quite young. And he would give a kind of an introduction to process and operations, where he'd just sit on top of the desk and begin to go through his lecture process. And as he's doing that, he's taking off his shoe and his sock and continually talking, going through this whole operations aspect, and then taking his sneaker and putting it back on, and taking his sock and putting it on over his sneaker. He said, you know, that reminds me, it's just not knowing how to do the process correctly, but the sequence of operation is really important. So it's those crazy nuggets that have stayed with me over time. And it made it interesting, kept you awake at night. So that's good, thank you. Any other questions?
Hi. How did you find, like, when you guys first came up with the idea and had the investors, how did you guys first find the manufacturers to push your product through initially?
Good question. We've had, Well, first in the Waltham watch factory where we started, we kind of cobbled together with what are the processes and procedures and sequences of operation. You know, let's not put the sock on over the sneaker. Then we went out looking for people that were doing contract manufacturing. And there are a lot of people that do this. And we went to a small defense company in Marion, Massachusetts called Sipican, and they were making submarine drones. But they were looking for something else to fill in when they didn't have a military contract, and they thought our idea was kind of intriguing. And they were our first contract manufacturer. They made 1,000 units for us. And then when we were going to give them an order for the next 1,000 units, they raised the price. I said, no, this is going in the wrong direction. So then we found a company out in Minnesota who came to us through one of the initial investors we had. And they made about 30,000 machines for us. And then we had another investor in Canada that said, I want to build these things for us. And that was a company called BKI. And they made, I don't know, probably another 30,000 machines. Each time, from these different people that were very skilled in manufacturing, the product improved with some level of consistency. But when we had to go to when we made the decision to go to the home market, have a home appliance, we knew we needed somebody who could make large volumes. And for us at the time, our first order to the company in China was for 50,000 units, which for us was just staggering. And they really had the science and of how to do tooling efficiently, had a very high quality standard, and knew the small appliance market, so they contributed a lot to our success. And that brings me to another point that I missed, and that's the importance of strategic alliances. So when you have suppliers who are critical to your business, you can't have just a buyer-seller relationship. You really need a strategic alliance. And the foundation of that is based on, guess what? Trust, respect, and responsibility. And the idea of that is that we are going to put 100% of our effort into doing this as correctly as we possibly can. And that we're going to have some stumbling points. And when we have those stumbling points, we're not going to let them interfere with the ongoing business. We're going to trust each other to be able to resolve them. And the rule I have for a strategic alliance partner is that whatever the issue is, at the end of the day, when we find a resolution, neither party will have an unearned gain nor an unwarranted liability. So we keep the playing field as level as possible. So that's been very important. So we moved over to China and got that business going. And in fact, next week when I'm there, Friday when I fly over, we're going to have a celebration for that first contract manufacturer in China. And the celebration is the fact that last month they made their 60 millionth brewer for us. So that's been a great strategic alliance. And so have the other 3 contract manufacturers. But how you do it is you put together a selection criteria. What skill sets you're looking for, and what are you going to contribute to it, and then see how closely they match the skill sets.
Hi, you were talking about how when you guys went public, you had to do a lot of things to please the investors. Do you think investor pressure is a negative thing because it forces you to do something to please them, or do you see it as a positive thing because it drives you to move forward?
Personal comment on that. I think it's a negative thing. I think it's one of the drawbacks of our industrial economy is that and one of the reasons why we lost a lot of industry in our economy is we're in this 13-week cycle to report quarterly. And, the product development growth doesn't follow a perfect 13-week cycle. You can have setbacks, sometimes of your own doing, sometimes not your doing. And I find it very disheartening, and also it undermines the need to bring that truth to power. And with Keurig, it's particularly important because if you think about it, we're essentially a one-trick pony. We basically make an appliance and a portion pack. That's our game. We don't have a flat-screen TV or a cell phone to fall back on. This is it. We're going to do this well, or we're not going to do it. We're out of business. So I found it a negative. the fact that we were publicly traded and the stock took off, and I like many others, made more money than I ever expected. I certainly would be a hypocrite to say I didn't appreciate that. But in terms of what it does to the business, it's tough. It's one of the things I like now about the JAB acquisition. They made us a private company again. I said, we're going to do what's in the best interest of the company, and consumers will be happy with that. Okay. Yes?
When you mentioned industrial design during the process of making the Keurig,
Right.
My ears kind of perked up because I'm a mechanical engineer turned industrial designer. So
Went to the dark side.
That's right. So my question is, when the Keurig made it to the industrial design phase, did you find any of the work of the mechanical engineers getting compromised? And if so, what was your response to that?
No, I didn't find any of the work being compromised, but I found to try and get the meeting of the minds, and this is where you bring the groups together as a team. So, okay, this is what we have to focus on. I said, well, the industrial designer said, well, we want this beautiful radius and curved line, and the mechanical engineers are saying, I've got to put a pump here that's putting out heat, and you're not allowing me to cool the thing. We're going to, that curved line, that curved plastic is going to melt on you. So we have to work those things out, and it's, again, going back to fit, form, and function, you get the function and the fit guys working closer together. And you get clever ideas, and sometimes you come up with some patentable solutions. But if you let everybody work in separate silos or in isolation, you're going to come up with conflicts, and you're going to get the finger pointing routine. So, but no, they're two beautiful skills, and I have great admiration for the industrial designers. I admire anybody who has great freehand drawing skills. I watch them work on it. Jesus, I can't, give me a compass and 3 rulers, and I can't do a straight line or a circle. And they just do it. It's neat. Any other questions? All the way in the back. The question furthest from the microphone never fails. Okay.
Great job without the notes.
So
You mentioned respect and responsibility and trust, I think, as kind of the cornerstone of any well-functioning team, and I can certainly appreciate that, whether it's Vietnam or in the business world. But my experience is that there's some where your respect and trust are more readily earned than others. How do you deal with that variance, given that you want to have that ideally across the entire group in a well-run team?
That's where the team leaders and the people that they report to have to instill that ethic, and that just becomes an expectation, and you do that by example. And transparency is very important within the organization, especially when you're a startup, because you're going to have more things coming at you, more negative things coming at you than you can begin to imagine. And you need the transparency to let everybody know where we stand, and let everybody know whatever they do, it is respected. And in fact, in Keurig, as many startups do, before we were a publicly traded company, every employee, whether he was a janitor or a bench inspector or an engineer, all received equity in the company. So they all had skin in the game. And it was just another way of saying, one, it was an incentive. We want you with us long term, because we didn't have a lot of money to pay great salaries. But if we're successful, we'll have a big payout. And then they all know that they're respected enough and will take responsibility for their jobs. And you find out quickly, whether somebody can buy into this work ethic or they can't. And most people do. But when they don't, then it's time to move them out of the business. So as you go out into the business world and you become a boss, one critical rule is to hire slowly and fire quickly.
More questions?
Yeah, I just wanted you to elaborate on how you went from engineering to management and kind of what that transition looks like.
Yeah, I began to realize early on, having gone to school for 10 years at night to scrape through to get my degree, that I was a better manager than engineer. But I also came to really respect and appreciate it, how really important the talented engineers were. So while I'm a vice chairman of the Honors College Board of Visitors, I would never be an Honors College student. I'm happy to support you and proud to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I know who that is now. Really? Well, back in the day, yeah. Did you use it? Which I was going to say, it's not back at the time. It was much heavier. It was built to last a while. Yeah. Yeah. That's why it cracks the wall.
Next.
Yeah?
They offer
I haven't looked in the CSRB yet, because I was also looking for I would like to do that.
Well, that was the thing.
But like another, and then sort of take but I do all. I meant Chris, yeah.